Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a topic that literally keeps property buyers up at night. We're going to decode the extreme stress and, frankly, the harsh realities of delayed real estate projects. To do this, we're using fresh, real-world data straight from the Malaysian property market to understand exactly what happens when a property development just hits a brick wall. So let's dive right in and unpack what this actually means for your hard-earned investments.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the anatomy of a sick project, then peek behind the curtain at developer cash flows. From there, we'll break down the buyer's dilemma, examine abandonment versus revitalization, and finally extract some really essential investment lessons. Picture this. You've just locked in a great deal on your first property. You're excited, you drive past the site eager to see the progress. But month after month, those cranes just aren't moving. The progress is agonizingly slow, and that promised completion date, it's slipping right through your fingers. It's an absolute roller coaster of emotions and anxiety, especially if you're a first-time buyer who's suddenly terrified that your dream home is morphing into a total nightmare.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, the anatomy of a sick project.
Now, before you hit the panic button, you should know that you can actually check official project statuses right on the government's KPKT website. A project socket, or sick project, actually has a very specific legal threshold. It means the development is either 30% behind schedule or it has completely blown past its promised completion deadline. So, for instance, if your deadline is early 2026 and they're still just messing around with foundational work instead of, putting on a roof, that triggers the sick status. This is actually a scenario playing out right now with the Solasta project, where anxious buyers are noticing incredibly slow progress and starting to raise the alarm.
But we really have to contrast that with a project terbengkalai, which means an abandoned project. This is the one you really don't want. This is when the builder has completely thrown in the towel, the site is a ghost town, the directors have walked away, and buyers are just left in total limbo. It's super important to separate a project that's merely struggling to keep up with its timeline from one that has legally and physically just flatlined. Moving on to Section 2, behind developer cash flows. There's this massive misconception out there that developers simply don't care if a project gets delayed. The reality? They care deeply. And why is that? It all comes down to the APDL, the Advertising Permit and Developer License. If a developer has, say, 5 ongoing projects and just one of them falls into that sick status we talked about, the government will freeze the APDL for all of their projects. That means they literally cannot market or sell anything else. A single sick project can choke their entire business pipeline. So believe me, it is a very big deal for them. So what happens when their cash flow dries up? Developers have to make some incredibly aggressive moves to raise capital. In a desperate bid to rescue these delayed projects, they will liquidate massive assets. We've actually seen developers sell off prime Kuala Lumpur land, like a huge plot opposite the Concord Hotel that went to Chin Hin, for roughly ₹500 million ringgit. They are doing this to secure hundreds of millions in pure cash just to fix their operational issues.
But here's the catch, and it's why this takes so agonizingly long. If you're a developer desperate for cash, the entire market smells the blood in the water. Competitors are absolutely going to try to lowball you. Developers are holding on to these valuable lands, or even selling entire malls to giants like Sunway. But finding buyers walking around with hundreds of millions in cash, that takes serious time. They're trying to negotiate deals so they don't get stuck selling at 40 cents on the dollar, aiming instead for maybe 65 or 70 cents. And navigating those massive corporate transfers is exactly why everyday buyers experience months of agonizing delays on the ground.
All right, let's look at Section 3, the buyer's dilemma. So, you're a buyer, and you're at this crucial fork in the road. It's essentially a binary choice. On one hand, you can just choose to walk away, cut your losses, cancel your sales and purchase agreement, and usually burn your 10% deposit. But hey, you free yourself up to buy something else. On the other hand, you can stay. You grit your teeth, endure the stress, wait out the delays, but eventually you secure the property and get to collect what's called LAD, liquidated ascertained damages. This basically means the developer legally owes you financial compensation for every single day they're late. But let's say you want the best of both worlds. You want to walk away, but you want a full refund without burning your deposit. Well, under Section 8A of the current Housing Development Act, this is incredibly tough. You have to prove 3 distinct things. First, 6 continuous months of absolutely zero work on site. And I mean zero. Even one guy hammering a single nail breaks this rule. Second, you have to get consent from your financing bank, a bank that has already projected 30 years of interest revenue from you. And third, the government body, KPKT, has to officially certify the situation. Walking away with all your money completely intact, it's a massive uphill legal battle. Which brings us to Section 4, Abandonment and Revitalization. This right here is the ultimate financial nightmare for any property buyer. The property isn't just delayed, it's completely dead. Yet, because the bank has already released, say, 50% of the loan to the developer to build the foundation, you are legally on the hook for that money. You have to service monthly bank interest on a very expensive, ugly concrete skeleton that you can't live in and you absolutely cannot rent out. That is the true heavy toll of a totally abandoned project. But wait, there is actually a silver lining here when we look at the macro data. Statistics show that local authorities and the government have successfully revitalized over 1,300 sick or abandoned projects. So there really is a strong, active push at the systemic level to step in, clean up the mess, and fix the market rather than just letting these sites rot away. And we are seeing this happen all over. Long-abandoned projects, those ones historically known in the market as mega air filters because of their hollow, open concrete structures, like that famous one in Subang, they're finally being revived. Plus, the surrounding infrastructure is booming right now. We're getting closer to the MRT3 completion, and there are new highways connecting Jalan Kuching straight into Dutomes. Honestly, these macro-level infrastructure upgrades are a huge reason why holding on to a delayed property might actually make brilliant long-term sense. Let's put this into perspective and see how it translates to value, because this is exactly why buyers stick around despite the chest-crushing stress. Early buyers of the delayed Salasta project locked in prices around 800 ringgit per square foot. Right next door, a recently completed project is already transacting at 1,100 ringgit with fantastic corporate rental rates. And just up the road, a new Marriott-branded project is launching at up to 1,600 ringgit. If you can just hold on and weather the storm, you're sitting on incredible equity the very second those keys are finally handed over. And finally, Section 5, Essential Property Investment Lessons. First things first, we need to completely shatter a massive sales pitch myth. So many buyers assume that if a developer is publicly listed on the stock exchange, they're just magically immune to cash flow problems. That is simply false. Big brand names face fluctuating costs and operational hurdles just like anyone else. On the flip side, sometimes brand new, unknown regional developers offer incredibly solid value precisely because they don't have a big brand name to lean on. They literally have to prove themselves by delivering great products at reasonable prices just to survive in the market. So, how do you actually protect yourself? Well, here is the ultimate survival rule. Maintain a 6-month safety buffer. For any property you buy, whether it's your first home or part of a huge investment portfolio, you should always have 6 months of installment payments saved up in cash. Now, sure, people are going to argue about opportunity cost, but that cash buffer guarantees your personal peace of mind. If a project is delayed or a unit sits empty without a tenant for a few months, you can actually sleep soundly at night without financial ruin hanging over your head. Which leaves us with this final thought. When you manage to secure property at a steep discount, the financial upside can be totally life-changing. But the road to get there might be paved with years of delays, legal hurdles, and immense psychological stress. So the real question you have to ask yourself before ever signing on that dotted line is this: is the anxiety of a delayed project truly worth the ultimate price of a bargain? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you on the next one.